when we fall to the ground, and he's still fighting me, and he takes my gun, and you can hear me say, please, please. All I can think is her, who was gonna pick her up from school, who was gonna be there for her.
A deputy in a violent struggle with a man in Victorville. Then the suspect grabbed her gun and fired at her as she ran for her life.
When I signed up to be a cop, I remember thinking, it's for the greater good. If I have to die, it's the ultimate sacrifice. It's for a greater purpose. And then I remember in this situation, I'm about to die for what? Why did this mom even call me here?
And the second the deputy appears on camera, it's a life and death struggle. She's attacked by a man who seems crazed and out of control, and he gets her gun.
And I want to kind of just go through a couple moments, pivotal moments about what you were thinking. What are your initial emotions when you watch that video again?
Sad. I went home at the end of the day, but to know I shouldn't have, I thank God every day that my gun malfunctioned.
Shocking verdict. A local man found not guilty of attempted murder.
In this heartfelt episode of the Ryan Tillman Show, we have the honor of bringing you an extraordinary guest whose story of bravery and resilience will leave an indelible mark on your heart.
So when I'm sitting on the stand and I basically got dehumanized, I became a villain because I wasn't worthy of being a victim because I was a cop.
Join us as we shine a light on the human side of those who protect and serve. Get ready for a conversation that will touch your soul and inspire your perspective. Meagan McCarthy, welcome to the show. This is the Ryan Tillman Show. Meagan, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you.
No, thank you for having me. It means a lot.
It's been, this has been a long time coming, I feel. So I remember meeting you, I think it was right after the critical incident, meeting you online, obviously, but I remember meeting you and I remember just feeling heartbroken at what you went through. And so I wanted to wait for the right moment, but I wanted to interview you for a long time simply because I believe you have such a crazy story that needs to be heard. And that's why we're actually doing this on this show, is because there's so many people, so many officers that put on that uniform, that sign up to do this job, but their voices are suppressed. And so thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for allowing me to give a voice to those people and for sharing my own story.
Absolutely. So before we even get into the critical incident, who was Meagan McCarthy before this critical incident?
Well, I am a mom of 3 now. At the time, back in 2019, I had just finished my assignment of being an elementary school resource officer. I adored that job. I mean, I'm sure you know SRO is one of the best gigs.
I did not know you were an elementary school resource officer, so that's awesome.
Yeah, I had 6 elementary schools that I was responsible for in Victorville, and I loved that job. I mean, it was perfect. And once the school year ended, I went back out to patrol, and I was happy. I loved my career. I was happy at my station, and life was good.
How long had you been on the force at that time before this incident happened?
3 years.
3 years.
3 years.
And so life was great.
Yeah.
Loving your assignment as a school resource officer.
Yeah, it was perfect. I mean, I didn't know exactly where I wanted my career to go. I didn't know if I wanted to do investigations like homicide or crimes against children. And then I was fortunate enough to get the SRO spot, and I was like, this is what I want to do. Seeing those kids every day. And, obviously there's tough stuff with the CPS reports and all that, but just having that relationship with those kids, I looked forward to work every day.
So before this, you're married and you have 1 child at the time.
Yes.
What drove you into law enforcement? Was this something that you always wanted to do your whole life? Like family was in law enforcement? What made you want to be a deputy?
Well, I actually went to school for nursing, and I was in the middle of getting all of those prerequisites done. And my friend was like, hey, why don't you just come out for a ride along? It's, kind of cool. And so I went, and I was hooked. I think 2 hours into my ride along, we went on a pursuit, and it was like, that perfect, storm of, I want to help people. And then, the pursuit was cool. And then you get to see the community. And I was like, this is what I want to do.
So you went from nursing to like, hey, I'm about to be chasing people down and doing what I got to do.
Yeah. And so I think 6 months later, I started the academy. So it was just like a perfect opportunity, and it was a perfect timing. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you're in law enforcement. You graduate from the academy. And you're high on life, right? So now let's fast forward to, was it June or July
My shooting?
Yeah, your shooting.
September.
Okay, so September of 2019.
Yeah.
And just so you know, I do know it was September. The reason I know it was September is because school had just started. And I remember I was a school resource officer at the time too at Downlogo High School. And I remember walking on campus, and me and Billy are always looking at notifications and stuff like that of critical incidents. And I remember when that came out, and I remember just looking at it like kind of just floored, like, wow, like what did I just watch? I watched it over and over again. And I remember, I think I made a breakdown on that video.
Yeah.
And so I remember when that occurred, and I just didn't know what to think. So walk me through that day. I want to know, like, okay, when you rolled at work, when you got to work that day, went to the locker, was it just an ordinary day? Like, walk me through what happened that day and kind of like how it unfolded.
Yeah, it was just your ordinary. I think it was a Wednesday, and I was working 4 days that week. I had taken my daughter to kindergarten, dropped her off, and went to work. And after briefing, I had a little bit of a time to go, and I went home and I grabbed a coffee. My husband had worked a triple homicide the night before, so I said hi to him, and it's actually kind of eerie if you think about it. When I went home to get my coffee, he said, "Hey, let me see your gun," and he press checked it. He's like, "I just want to check, just want to make sure." You know, he's on the SWAT team. He thinks.
Now let me pause you. Does he normally do that?
No, that was the first time he had ever done that.
So if you're watching this and don't know what she means by press checking, like, you know, press checking is when you like basically press the barrel or your slide back on your gun to make sure that it's loaded, it's ready to rock. Cock lock and ready to rock is like what I like to call it. When I start my shift, I usually will press check just to make sure, because you never know, there may be that day where you didn't have a round in the chamber. So that's very, very interesting. So yeah, continue. And once we get to the actual incident itself, I want you to pause right there. So keep going.
Yeah, and every shift I always do that, but he felt the need to check himself, which is fine. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We had gone shooting the weekend before, so I don't know if he thought that maybe I forgot. Regardless, and then I left and I was driving back. I lived in Victorville at the time, so I was driving back to my area of my beat that day, and a call came over the radio. It was like 8 o'clock, 8:05 in the morning, and it came out, and I was right down the road. I think I was like less than 5 minutes away. So I responded to the call, and I told dispatch, like, send it to me. I'm en route. It wasn't my area, but I knew that I could cover it.
So what type of call was it?
It came out as an unknown problem. So
those are always the worst. There's nothing good that ever comes from an unknown trouble.
No, nothing. And we didn't really have too much of the time. It came out as a priority too. There was a lady on the phone saying, oh my God, get my son out of here, get him out of here. You could hear some kind of commotion in the background, but nothing telling. So
was that all information that you knew prior to, like arriving on scene, that some lady was calling, getting my son out the house? Did they give a description of him at that time or no?
I don't remember. I don't think so. I think she had given, like, he was wearing a white t-shirt and basketball shorts. And I think that was basically all we had. I knew it was just her, the reporting party, and her son in the house. But as I'm driving, then dispatch goes back on the air and says, hey, it's bumped to a priority 1. She's no longer responding. I can still hear her on the phone, but she's not communicating.
Now, based on the video, and we're going to get ready to watch the video, based on the video, it looks like it's in a cul-de-sac, right? Mm-hmm. So when you pull into that cul-de-sac, was there anybody else outside, or was it just him?
No, nobody was even out yet. So I had parked like 2 houses down. The house was at the very end of the cul-de-sac. And so I parked my unit and I start walking up towards the front door. And as I'm just breaking like the barrier between the gravel and the driveway, the front door opens and he comes walking out directly towards me, and the reporting party, his mom, is following him holding a knife in one hand, and she's still on the phone with dispatch on the other.
Wow. So I want to stop there, and the reason I want to stop there is because as I was reading the report, and I was reading I don't want to get too far as like the court proceedings after, but his defense tried to say that you had no reasonable suspicion to even detain this person.
Yeah, exactly.
And like that baffles me, because you have an unknown trouble, you're at the house, you know the house, you know that there's been screaming and yelling, and your job as a deputy at the time is to investigate. And so a lot of times if you have to investigate, especially if there could be some type of critical incident going on, there's reasonable suspicion right then and there, especially if you're at the right house. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, you're 100% correct. And California Post actually says somebody calling 911 requesting law enforcement gives you the standard of reasonable suspicion. We can go into all of the minutia about it, but, furtive movements or the belief that there is a crime about to occur or is occurring or had occurred. And so when I arrive and I see him walking out and he's walking directly towards me, we've locked eyes and made eye contact. His fists are clenched. You know, he has that typical demeanor of somebody that's mad. And so when I see his mom holding a knife, my instinct is, okay, she's armed herself against him. So what occurred on the phone where she was, oh my God, and then nothing? You know, was somebody hurt in the house? Was she hurt? I didn't know.
So you had everything there that you needed to detain whoever. I mean, even the mom at that moment in time, because it's an unknown trouble, but you visually can see something's going on. You're at the right address. Yeah. Now, did you have any information about who this guy was, his mental capacity or lack thereof, schizophrenia, anything like that?
No, nothing. There was nothing communicated during the mom's interaction with dispatch. When I arrived, I didn't even get a chance to talk to the mom. Everything happened so quickly. I mean, we started fighting like 19 seconds into my arrival. And the mom had somehow three-wayed the grandma on the phone with 911, and the grandma was relaying to dispatch, you know, he's on medication. I didn't know that, and we didn't know what medication. Yeah,
because you're not getting this information right away. You're just trying to deal with him at this point.
Exactly.
A lot of times people forget and they don't realize, you know, it's so easy for people, you know, the phrase Monday morning quarterback. But it's so easy for people to do that. You know, she should have known that he was schizophrenic, he was on medication, mental illness, whatever it may be. But as an officer, you're going to an unknown trouble, and your job is to get there as fast as you can for the most part, because time is of the essence, and you're not always getting fed this information right away. And so you're making a decision based on what you see and what you have right at that moment, not based on everything that comes out after the fact, correct?
Exactly. I mean, our standard is reasonable suspicion for detention based under the totality of the circumstance. And that sounds all great, but all that means is I can only do with what I know.
Exactly.
So I can't predict the future. I don't have x-ray vision to see he has a weapon, he doesn't. That's why we conduct detentions, to figure this out. I mean, I don't think any law enforcement officer feels comfortable responding to a situation without securing the scene.
100%.
And part of that is you have to make sure, does she have a knife because he has a knife? I don't know. I don't want to make assumptions.
Yeah.
And then I'm wrong, and all of a sudden he turns and stabs her, or we have a fleeing felon.
Yeah.
So all I tried to do was just, hey, relax. Put your hands behind your back.
Separate everybody, yeah.
Exactly.
Did you already have partners en route at this point, or they didn't come until it actually the whole situation unfolded?
I believe I had one partner en route, but he was on the other side of the city. So our area of Victorville is pretty vast, and I got a lot of heat for not waiting for a partner. And the sheriff's department, we run one-man units, and it's one-man response.
Yes. So I want to go somewhere real quick, because I think this is important. So a lot of times I've done presentations all over the place, and people assume that, you know, there's hundreds of officers on patrol at one time. So how come you didn't wait for a backup unit? How come you didn't wait for your partner? You're working in the city of Victorville. About how many deputies did you guys have working that morning, roughly?
6 to 8, maybe.
And how big is Victorville's a pretty big city?
It's
correct?
Huge. I can't tell you the exact population, but it's up there. I mean, we cover a huge area. It's hundreds of square miles. Like, it's a big area. And Victorville is ranked the number 9 most dangerous city in all of California.
Wow.
So there's hot crime happening from sun up to sundown. You don't always have time to have 4 people respond, because you have to respond to other things.
So for perspective, 6 to 8 deputies working this shift. Your deputy or your partner is on the other side of town. Mm-hmm. You're going on unknown trouble. So if you're watching this podcast, you're watching this video, think about this. If you call the police for an emergency, somebody's trying to attack you, whatever it may be, do you want them waiting outside, or do you want them, if they're there or nearby, to come and at least try to prevent or slow things down? What would you want if you're that civilian listening to this? And I really want you to answer that, or ask yourself that question, because that's what we're dealing with here. And kind of the way this whole case unfolded is almost setting precedents for deputies and officers to wait despite your emergency, simply because if I'm facing a situation, which we're about to see here in a second, is it worth the risk versus reward? Is it even worth me going in at this point in time if I know that they're not going to get here on time? So is it worth me coming to help you, or should I just wait? And that's kind of what we're setting precedents for, especially if the system doesn't have your back.
Yeah. And, you know, I know you want to talk about it a little bit later, but that was one of the standards that the jurors set, was she should have just waited. What was the point in rushing in? And to me, I'm sitting there not only as now I'm retired, but now I'm looking at it from a civilian point. If I'm fighting with somebody, am I comfortable knowing that my own cops in my city are just comfortable waiting outside while I'm potentially being assaulted or violated or, whatever? I think that's disgusting to think that cops should just wait. I mean,
that's scary for everybody. I mean, it's scary for your partners, because now I know, like, if, I got to wait, for whoever to get there, when I'm like, hey, I need to handle this situation now. Like, imagine, you pull up there, we call it code 51 or code 51, and you wait away, but somebody's coming out, but I can't go up there when I know, like, it's dangerous for me just sitting here too. Right. But it also is dangerous for the civilians, like you're saying, like, hey, if I call the police and I'm waiting on them to get here because they got to wait for a partner. All right, Meagan, so what we're going to do now is we are going to watch the video briefly. I've already sped it up, but I'm only doing this because I think it's important. I mean, there's so much conversation. This whole show is centered around critical incidents and what happens, what's going through your mind. So I want to play it through, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to rewind it, and then I want to kind of just go through a couple moments, pivotal moments about what you were thinking. So let's go ahead and watch the video, and then we'll go ahead and kind of go back. All right, so before I even go through, what are your initial emotions when you watch that video again?
Sad. It's one of those things where I'm thankful that I can watch that and know that I lived. I'm living, breathing. I went home at the end of the day, but to know I shouldn't have, and there was a very high possibility that the world would have just watched me get executed. It's just a wave of emotions. And I think especially now that I sit here and we've gone through the proceedings, and I just feel like I was abandoned. And, it's very similar to when I was in that moment and I was by myself begging him not to kill me. And then now I'm over here like begging people to do the right thing, and neither one panned out in my favor. So it's, to answer your question, it's just it's very overwhelming. Absolutely.
I remember in the academy, you and I went to the same academy. They had this idea of will or survive. And I remember when they taught us about will or survive as an officer, or as a trainee rather. And it was real, but it was like, this is part of the training.
Right.
And I don't think we ever really think about there may be a day where you actually have to fight for your life. And it seemed like this is one of those moments for you where you were literally in a situation where you had to survive. And at the time, if I'm not mistaken, you had a child at home, correct?
Yeah, my daughter was in kindergarten, and I have 2 other littles now, but it was just me and her at the time. And it's weird because when you go through something like that, people always wonder, was it fast? Was it slow? Did your life really flash before your eyes? And it's true. Like, I remember, I can still smell those smells that morning. I can still remember the pain and the fleeting hopelessness that I felt, like guilt. That's a cop's worst nightmare, is having their own weapon used against you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I'm sitting here, I went through the whole use of force continuum. I tried the officer presence, the verbal commands, the defensive tactics. I tried my RCB, and now I'm begging him not to kill me. And he still tried twice. So it's one of those things where, they teach you in the academy, like, don't have the superhero or the Superman complex. Like, don't think you're invincible. But when I put on my vest and I go out to work, nobody ever thinks like, man, that next call, like, I'm going to have to toughen up because I'm going to be the victim of an attempted homicide. Like, you never think about those things. You try to not be complacent, to use your training for the traffic stops and the domestic violence. But I'll be honest, I never once thought that I would have to beg somebody not to kill me. I didn't.
Oh my! Now, and you're saying, as you're thinking about these things, like, you're thinking about your daughter as this is actually unfolding.
Yeah, I felt so much guilt because
like, in the moment, you're feeling guilt in the moment.
Yeah, right when I remember when we fall to the ground, and that's when I realized, like, I had lost this fight. I there was a possibility that I wasn't going to make it home. I had no idea somebody was in an upstairs bedroom filming this. I had no idea. But I just remember telling my daughter, like, I'll see you after school. We never said goodbye. It's always, I'll see you later. And when we fall to the ground and he's still fighting me and he takes my gun and you can hear me say, please, please, all I can think is her. Mm-hmm. You know, who was going to pick her up from school? Who was going to be there for her? How do you murder someone's mom? Mm-hmm. That's what I was thinking in those exact seconds, you know? And it's just sad because when I signed up to be a cop, I remember thinking, you know, it's for the greater good. You know, if I have to die, it's the ultimate sacrifice. It's for a greater purpose. And then I remember in this situation, like, I'm about to die for what? Like, why did this mom even call me here? I still don't even know why I'm here. And she's in the background screaming at him, stop, no, don't, stop. And nobody helped me. Nobody helped me to survive other than myself. And I thank God every day that my gun malfunctioned, because if it wouldn't have, I would have just been murdered.
So let's talk about that for a second. So I heard rumors, and I say rumors because you know how law enforcement community is. You hear about an incident and they, you know, everybody starts talking. And I heard that, hey, she's only alive because of gun malfunction. Yeah. Now, whether or not that was true or not, I didn't know at the time. I mean, everybody, I've noticed a lot of times we always put dubs on stuff as officers sometimes. Yeah. But it sounds like the gun really did malfunction in this. What part? So I'm gonna replay the video and I want to kind of walk through and I want you to kind of tell me at the moment in time, like, this is kind of the moment in time where the gun malfunctioned. So let's start it one more time and then. So that first gunshot, how did that, is that you pulling the trigger?
Yeah, that was me. So when I had fallen to my back and I was giving him, you know, I don't want to say commands, but I was telling him I'm going to shoot you. I was hoping that would be enough of an indicator to like stop and like relax, but you know, it wasn't. So we fall to the ground and I had unholstered my gun and I'm laying on my back and I aimed at his head and I missed. And then
now when you first shot at him, did you shoot at him or you just like let off a round like to kind of scare him away?
No, I tried to shoot him. Okay. And you can see just seconds before I had turned over now, but I'm on my back and he's on top of me, like mounted on top of me. And I, you know, single-handedly tried to shoot at his head, but you know, he was still punching me. We were still fighting. So that round missed.
I remember going back to the academy in the Will to Survive, actually. They had some big SWAT guy operator. You come to the bar or whatever, and the guy, I don't know if they had the scenario the same for you. You go to the bar, guy's not listening to you, and you know it's the red man that they call it, because you go there and as soon as you walk in, the guy is like all outfitted and like
the mat room.
Yeah, the mat room. All these mats everywhere. So I already knew what was gonna happen. And so I had already kind of mentally prepared myself, like, oh, you know what, go do what you gotta do. So I get there, he like throws the bottle down, he's not complying. And I remember this feeling of helplessness at one moment in time, because he was huge. This guy was huge. And he literally grabbed me from behind and suplexes me. My crap went everywhere. Like all my equipment, my taser, everything. And I remember pulling my gun out and I remember him on top of me, just pounding me. And at that moment in time, when you talk about the Will to Survive and the red man, like I remember like he had induced a malfunction on my gun, because they were blank guns, so like they were supposed to go out, and he induced a malfunction to where I couldn't press that trigger. And I remember the feeling of pressing that trigger and it not going bang. And so I remember at that moment in time, like trying to pistol whip him in the head with my gun, because in my mind I was like, that's all I have. Right. And so I think some people don't realize that when we're dealing with, when we're, it's all nice and dandy to say, you know, we give the commands and all that, because that's the way you're going to be judged. Did you give commands? Did you utilize this less than lethal option? But when you're in the heat of the moment and you're literally trying to survive, everything goes out of the window. Yeah. And that was fake. So I can only imagine what it was like for you. And this is real. Like you have somebody on top of you. So that round goes off, and the moment it misses, what are you thinking now?
Well, so then I had fired like this, and then he goes like this, and he traps my hand in the ground. And you can see a few seconds after this, we're fighting over my gun. And I remember now he is not punching me anymore, but we're wrestling over my gun. And I remember I had tried to take my finger off the trigger guard, but he had trapped my finger inside of it. So both of our hands were inside the trigger guard. And you'll hear and see another round go off in the dirt. And so that is when the malfunction happened.
So that's your finger in the trigger well?
Yeah, both of ours. So my hand was like this, and imagine this is my gun. And he goes like this, and his hand is like partially wrapped around the slide and partially in the trigger guard. So he has like a full grip.
Gotcha.
And he's trying to rip it out of my hand. So you can see us like fighting over it. And then we discharge a round. Right there.
Right there.
So if you stop right there, when you see you can see the dirt go. Mm-hmm. So what had happened in that moment was the slide wasn't able to completely cycle. So that FCC stovepiped. And that was a malfunction that saved my life. So because his hand was partially blocking the slide, when we sent that round off, instead of the round going this way, it went like this. So just half a second before this, you can see the gun come up.
Yeah.
That was him trying to shoot at me, at my head, but that stovepipe was there and he didn't know it.
Wow. So let me think about it. I got to process this because this is like, it's so much deeper than what, I mean, the videos don't even do it justice.
No.
One of the things, again, in the proceedings that came out was he didn't have an intent to kill you. He shot away from you.
Yeah, so this first round, when it's aimed at my forehead, the defense claimed that he never pressed the trigger. He was in self-defense of me, so that's why he took my gun.
How does that make you feel? I mean, because now you're no longer a police officer or a deputy at this moment in time. You're a victim.
Right.
You're a victim of a crime. And
Yeah.
so if you're watching this, imagine being a victim of a crime. And I remember going to a retreat in the mountains for officers that had been involved in officer-involved shootings. And one of the things that stood out to me at that conference, that retreat that I went to, was all the officers that had been shot at, they said that the moment they were shot at, it made them feel like it was personal.
Right.
And there was multiple feelings of rage, feelings of anger, like you just tried to kill me. Did you experience any of that? Because again, you're at a victim now. Like somebody literally tried to take your life. What did that make you feel like at that moment in time?
I don't think there's one emotion to kind of wrap up that whole moment for me. I spent 3 days being cross-examined by the defense, and that's unheard of. That's disgusting that a defense attorney or just a person can hear my testimony, watch this video, hear the belt recording, realize I am now a victim of a crime. I'm entitled to Marsy's Law rights.
Yeah, absolutely.
And every single one of those was violated.
Can you explain Marsy's Law real quick for those that don't know what that is?
Yeah, so Marsy's Law it was created after a student from a college up north, and she tried to give warning signs about her abusive boyfriend, and the cops never really took her serious. The boyfriend ends up killing her, and California enacted this Marsy's Law rights where you can provide victim services to domestic violence victims, sexual assault victims, just any victim. You provide them this pamphlet, and it shows where shelters are, victim resources, things to help them escape their dangerous situations. So now that the state of California deemed that I was a victim of a crime, I got the pamphlet in the mail.
I've gotten one of those before, exactly. For a little cut on my arm. I'm a victim, guys.
Right. And I was like, wow, thanks. Like, I appreciate this.
Yeah.
But I thought that my justice was going to be served regardless if I got a pamphlet telling me I was a victim. So when I'm sitting on the stand and I basically got dehumanized and I became a villain because I wasn't worthy of being a victim because I was a cop.
Oh my goodness.
So the two didn't correlate for the defense or the jury.
Oh my goodness. I mean, there's an array of emotions going on that I feel. I'm a dad. I have 3 kids. I have a wife. And my kids didn't sign up for their dad to be murdered in the line of duty. My kids didn't sign up for the late nights, the early mornings, the missed birthdays. My wife didn't sign up for that. Yeah. So when somebody tries to take your life, it just takes it to a whole nother level. So the aftermath of a critical incident like this brings about a lot of emotions like we're talking about. Talk about your journey now and how it's been to kind of get over this, or I don't want to say necessarily get over it, but how have you been able to process this? Because I know it's not easy, and I know you're no longer with the department, correct? So tell me about your journey since this has kind of happened.
So I medically retired March of 2022 for PTSD, and I spent basically from September 5th, 2019 to present day trying to navigate this mental health journey. I felt like I had been doing pretty well, and I had a lot of things to live for now that I had a repurpose, you know, my husband, my daughter. But things really hit me in 2021. It was probably 8 months after my son was born, and I don't remember what happened to me, but I remember I woke up and I felt wrong. Like I was having almost an out-of-body experience. I couldn't understand it. I had a therapy session with my trauma therapist. I did EMDR, and I'm like, man, this is not Meagan. Like I'm watching myself. And I remember texting my husband that day, like, I think you need to come home. Like, I don't know why, but like, I'm not feeling good. And my husband dropped what he was doing and came home. And my daughter was not home at the time. And I remember sitting in my bathroom, and my son was taking a nap, and the house was quiet. And I remember it just kind of hit me. It had been nearly 2 years after my shooting, and it was like, had clicked in my mind, like, oh my God, like I almost died. And at the time I was prescribed 6 different medications to help with this and that and this and that. And I felt hopeless. And I remember taking those pills like a lot. And I remember sitting in that bathroom, and I'm like, I think I'm overdosing. Like, I think I'm dying. And my husband gets home, and he's like, what's going on? What did you take? What did you take? And he calls my parents, and he asks them to come over. He's like, something's wrong with Meagan. Like, I need help. What do I do? And I remember we had a safe in our room, and I remember going to the safe, and I grabbed my gun. And he's like, Meagan, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't be a mom. I can't be a wife. Like, I just don't want to do it anymore. Like, I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of hurting. And he takes my gun from me. And I sat on the couch with my parents, and I remember my dad's like, can I have a hug? And I'm like, what for? And that's when it hit me that I needed help. And I had been going through the motions of, you know, the therapy twice a week, and I'm good, I'm fine, I'm alive, I'm, you know, thriving. And then I realized, like, I'm not okay. And so that's really when I dove into all the resources of mental health, because I don't think I really understood PTSD and mental health. I think in our line of work, there's this trauma trophy mindset where, well, that's, your shooting's nothing. I went to a hostage rescue and I got shot at, and I picked up this baby off the ground, and that's nothing. Just get back. I was told, get back on the saddle. Just get into another fight. And so now I'm thinking, like, am I worthy of feeling like this? Like, he went back to work. He's fine. What's wrong with me? And so that's when I really realized, like, we got to start fighting for yourself, because you almost just killed it.
Is that why you're saying you kind of maybe felt you woke up feeling wrong? Because, like, it was almost like in the culture that we have in law enforcement, you know, everybody's telling you to get up and just do it, but you weren't feeling that way. Is that why you were kind of feeling like you felt wrong in that moment in time?
I think I had been putting on a front, like a fake Meagan, that I'm good. You know, people would call me, hey, how are you doing? I'm good. Do you need anything? No, I'm fine. I'm fine. And so I became kind of robotic and just like through the motions of, you have to be fine because you're not allowed to not be. And at this time, I didn't know if I was going to be retired or not. I didn't know if I was going to go back to work. So then how do I ask for help when I potentially need to go back to work? How would my peers take me seriously? Who would want to work with me? And that's when I realized I cannot be a cop. I need to fight for my mental health. I need to fight for retirement. It's not safe for the community. It's not safe for my partners. And it's certainly not safe for me anymore. And yeah.
There's so many internal pressures that people don't realize. It's just endless. because there's these feelings of what's my department going to think?
Yeah.
What are my peers going to think? What does my family think? Who am I for this person? I'm tough at work because I'm supposed to be tough at work.
Right.
But then I come home and I have to have it put together at home. You're a mom. You know, there's dads out there. I mean, I can only imagine. So having gone through that emotionally, what do you think helped you start getting back on track? Like, was it, and the reason I ask this question is because the number one killer for police officers is suicide. We just, last week, I think it was, Fontana PD showed up to a house of a domestic dispute, and the off-duty officer turns a gun at officers, and it seems like a suicide by cop. The other day, 2 days ago in Orange County, another retired officer opens fire, killing I think 6 people, including himself, at a bar. And I'm getting chills as I'm saying this because it's how scary it is.
Yeah.
What do you think? What can we do in law enforcement to help this? And you know, there's all these talk about, you know, officer wellness and this and that, but having been in it and also looking at it, it almost seems all surfacey.
Yeah.
It's a check the box.
Right.
And I think we've done a lot of that damage ourselves because we created this stigma. Like, you have to do this, you have to do that. And so we'll create something, oh, you check the box, our officers are well. But there's so many, even a lot of the most machoist guys out there are hurting inside.
Oh, yeah.
So what is it that we do? And if correct me if I'm wrong, but I know prior to this incident, you were pretty heavily involved on social media and you had a really good influence. Did that play into any of the part with the identity issues that you were having, as far as, like, you know, everybody sees you one way on social media, but then now that this is happening, do you still live up to that? Can you, like, tell me a little bit more about that?
I went through a complete identity crisis. I mean, as a cop, you're a cop. You get introduced at the barbecue as, hey, this is my friend Ryan. He's a cop. He can sign off your tint ticket.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like, you're this person. It's not like, you know, not to put down anybody else, but when you're a cop, that's who you are. You're expected to be a cop on and off duty. You know, they tell you in the academy, if you see something, you know, shouldn't intervene, but if it's part of saving someone's life, you should, because you have the means. And your identity gets wrapped up into this profession, so you don't know how to not be that profession. And so one thing that really stuck with me is, you know, what do they say pain is? Pain is weakness leaving the body. So if you're in pain, just go sweat it out, go run a mile, you know, kind of mask it, because there's people that are going through worse that need you. And I get messages every single day from people like, how do I go to my sergeant or my command like, hey, I need a mental health day? They're chastising me like, well, what about your beat? What about your paper? What about this? You know, use vacation time, use sick time, or, you know, we're short staffed today. They pressure you into showing up for them, but who's showing up for you? And I remember on my previous social media, I feel like we shared kind of the same thing, like breaking barriers and humanizing the badge. Like, I loved it because I would, you know, be at Target and somebody would say, thank you.
Yeah,
you know, I never looked at cops that way.
Absolutely.
I thought they were this type A personality, but like, you're a mom, you're a human being. Like, that's cool. And now I went into hiding because people just saw the worst 2 minutes of my life. I mean, how do you fit up to this mold of a cop when somebody just took my gun and tried to kill me? And he used my gun to shoot at my partners. And so now they're shooting at him. So am I... like, what do I do? And I don't think I came out of the house for months.
Did you feel embarrassed?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of my partners at the time were dropping off flowers and food, and they were there for me, and it was amazing. But life goes on, and when the dust settles and you're sitting in a quiet house by yourself and you're calling your friend or you're calling your beat partner and people aren't answering, it's like, well, who's really there for you?
So that stopped.
Yeah.
That eventually stopped.
Yeah.
I was telling somebody recently, we actually, on another podcast we host, we were talking about this concept, and I was talking to a friend of mine this morning before I did your interview, and I said, it's very interesting. We talk about this brother and sisterhood, you know, the thin blue line, and it's so tight. But I feel like sometimes on the day to day, you know, you see the people's true colors come out. You know, they're dogging you out. They're talking behind your back. They talk about how you responded to that call or how you did terrible on that call, how you're this, how you're that. But then the moment your life is lost in the line of duty, everybody shows up to your memorial service and they salute. And everybody, you have thousands and thousands and thousands of people show up. And everybody's hurt because we lost a sister, we lost a brother in blue.
Right.
And one of the things that is hard for me to process when I look at that whole picture is, how is it just convenient they're all of a sudden a brother and sister in blue when they when they lose their life in the line of duty, but we don't treat them like that when they're actually here?
Yeah.
Did you experience that type of feeling? Like, yeah, it was when it first happened. Yeah, everybody's here for me, but then like you said, when the dust settles, did it feel like you just kind of were abandoned?
Yeah. I mean, I remember, my husband eventually had to go back to work. My sister had to tend to her family. Life moves on as it should. Life can't stop.
Correct.
But my life has stopped. My life hasn't moved on since September 4th at 8:36 in the morning. And I saw this interesting video the other day, and it was like, who is the last phone call that a police officer makes before they commit suicide? It's not to their spouse who loves them the most. It's to their partners because they get them. Their partners understand, like, yeah, that rape was pretty tough. Let's talk about it. Instead, we say, hey, let's grab a beer after work and let's mask it. But what are the signs of suicide? Mm-hmm. What are the signs to look out for? How can you help your people if you don't know what you're looking for?
Yeah.
And I do think it is part of a systemic leadership problem, that there is this umbrella over your people, that as long as you're making sure your people are answering the 911 calls, they're not involved in wrong use of forces, so on and so forth. But are you really checking on your people?
Yeah.
Are you really saying, hey, Meagan, I noticed in briefing, like, you weren't connected. Do you need to take a couple minutes and go talk? Instead of like, hey, get out there. There's that robbery that just occurred. Like, get out and go. Are you checking on your people as people?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we drive home from these shifts and everybody experiences trauma differently.
Correct.
So what's to say we have to put it into a box and a stigma to say, okay, that was your 13th rape, now you qualify. Or that was your 4th mate car accident where you pulled a dead baby out. Like, now we believe you. It should be like, hey, I'm not feeling good. Okay, what can I do?
Correct. And not have the stigma of being soft or
weak.
You can't handle this job. Or And what people don't realize is we see more trauma in a lifetime than people ever experience, or on a shift. We experience more trauma on one shift than people experience in a lifetime. Mm-hmm. Talk about real quick, I mean, do you have has your spirituality, do you have a spirituality, or do you believe in God, or has that helped you at all or not helped you at all? I'm just curious because I want to talk about things that have maybe helped or hurt. And I know for me, when I've dealt with my trauma, I have a belief in God. And I think that's the only thing that's kind of given me peace in certain situations. Because we always ask the question of why? Mm-hmm. Why did you allow this? And I stopped wrestling with the why, and I started to rest in the fact that there's things that I don't understand. Mm-hmm. I remember there was a guy that took his life in front of me one time. And I remember for a few weeks after that, I kept saying, like, what if I would have just tackled him?
Right.
What if I would have just tripped him? I remember feeling bad by some of my partners saying, like, oh, you allowed this to happen because I didn't tactically respond right. And it really messed with me for a while. And then one day I woke up in the morning and God just put it on my heart, like, you're not supposed to have the answers for everything. You're not supposed to understand everything. And this was early on as a cop for me. This was probably about a year and a half in. And ever since that moment, that's kind of what's helped me realize that it doesn't mean I'm not going to deal with the trauma. I've dealt with the babies, the drowning babies, all, you name it. But I realized that there's something that's bigger than me.
Right.
So has that helped you, or have you hurt you or anything like that? No,
I mean, I think it would be immature of me to look at that video and say that God didn't give me a second chance. I mean, I don't believe that things don't happen for a reason. And I know that sounds very worldly because, our law enforcement is murdered and ambushed every day. Mm-hmm. And we still ask, like, why? Mm-hmm. How did that happen? But for me, I will say that I teetered with my spirituality for quite a while, because on one side of the fence, it was, how could you do this to me? Like, mm-hmm. I'm not strong enough to deal with this. What was the purpose? I woke up every day, you wake up with a purpose to go to work, and you have your friends and you have your people in your community. And then I woke up the next morning like, what do I do? You know, do I like get up and clean? Do I go to work? What do I do with myself? And then so I became angry and bitter and resentful at, why would you do this to me? Like, I have no idea how to navigate these waters. And I will say, after that August of 2021, I reshaped my belief into stop feeling like that and feel like you have a second chance for a purpose. We don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Faith is blind. You don't see it. You have to feel it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So take it day by day. Just relax. And, you know, I'm such a type A personality. I need control. I need that like security, and that just washed away. So I gave myself grace, and I gave myself permission to, I was grieving my old self, and I let myself do it. And we had been waiting for this trial to come, and I felt like, okay, I'll get my justice. I'll get my chance to speak. I had seen horrible podcasts. You know, the worst thing we can do is Google ourselves.
Oh, yeah. Don't do that. You're going to die tomorrow. You go WebMD yourself once you find out you got a runny nose.
So I did that, and I'm reading these things, and I'm like, it's okay, because when I go to trial, I'll be able to say my story. They'll hear my truth. They'll hear the audio where he tells me 5 seconds in, if we fight, I'll kill you. You know, like, I'll be fine, Meagan. You'll be good. Healed. Nothing. And so I don't think I really felt my purpose up until a few months ago. So mental health isn't a check the box. It's not a broken leg. Like, okay, your bone's healed, go back to work. It's every day you have to shift your perspective. You have to shift your feelings. And I still do that every single day. I still go to therapy. I still have my bad days, but my purpose has realigned itself.
That's amazing. Well, you're walking in your purpose now. I'm telling you that.
Thank you.
There are so many people that need to hear these stories.
Yeah.
There's two main points I want to bring that I want to talk about real quick, and then we'll start wrapping this thing up. But talking about that day and not being strong enough, there's a lot of controversy. I'm going to ask you something that could be, you know, deemed as controversial, but hey, that's why
Let's do it.
I like it. So there's this idea about women in law enforcement.
Yep.
And, you know, how some people don't believe that women should be in law enforcement for situations like this that you were involved in. What's your opinion on that? Has your mindset changed now, or do you see things differently? And I'm curious because, again, like, I see it all the time. I'll post a video of a video like yours. I just posted one the other day, actually. It was a very, very similar set of circumstances where a female officer was attacked with a hammer, and luckily she survived. But one of the comments was, this is why women shouldn't be in law enforcement. So what's your thought on that?
The best way I can put it is, would you tell your doctor that? If you show up to have surgery and it's a female brain surgeon, is she less equipped, but she has just the means to potentially inflict harm? We don't have, it's not built into our DNA to do one specific profession. I know there was plenty of times where I was able to talk to a suspect because I was a female versus my partners, because let's just face it, men and women talk differently. Yeah, that's just who we are. Absolutely. And I think we should embrace that. There's 100%. Situations where I would call for a male, like, hey, he doesn't want to talk to me because I'm a female. Can you come talk? Sure. And then I would get the, child abuse, like, hey, she doesn't want to talk to me. Sure. 100%. Let's work with each other. 100%. Why do we have to demonize everything? Why can't we just say, like, my actions weren't dictated. It was the suspect's actions that dictated this. I happen to be a female, and I happen to be a deputy, and I happen to respond to this call. What's to say it wouldn't have happened to my male partner?
And that's happened. And we've seen officers before, male officers, get their guns taken from them and actually get killed.
Right.
And you bring up a really good point, because, we always categorize things. It's everything. We almost make it seem like everything has to be black and white, and it's not.
No.
There's a lot of good points that you bring up. The fact that there have been many times where I needed a female officer to talk to somebody that I couldn't get through to. Just like sometimes you may need a black officer or a Hispanic officer, whatever it may be. And so when you have a diverse department, do I believe that there are a little bit more inherent risk with female at times? Potentially, yeah, because somebody's size is different. But that doesn't disqualify you. Like you said, you have tools that can overcome that resistance. And we've also seen, I've seen some really, really small guys that can't handle themselves. And so I think that's a very, very fair point to bring up. And I think it takes people to look at things more holistically.
Right.
And how many male officers have we seen die in the line of duty? So should that mean that nobody can do this job then?
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't want to get too much into the weeds because I want to stay on the purpose of hopefully using this for the greater good of somebody that's struggling. But I think over the last few years, we've seen this shift of it has to fit into a box. It has to fit into a category. It has to be on this side or that side. This is just crime. This is just law and order. This is just that line between good and bad, wrong and right. Like there's no discrimination between that.
Correct.
And I don't know why we have become there. I mean, when I sat on the stand, the defense attorney asked, well, do you think he didn't take you seriously because you wore fake eyelashes? Yeah. You know what?
Goodness.
That's why he decided I was less worthy of living because I have fake eyelashes.
What amazes me is that he can even sit there and ask a question like that and get away with it.
How hurtful is that to every woman? Or if a male is sitting on the stand, well, do you think you should have done this and that and this and that? I mean, you can only do with what you can do. Should I have taken ground combat? Absolutely. Do I champion people to enroll in jiu-jitsu? 100%. Does that mean that I should have died because I didn't? No.
Yeah. So let's transition now because I want to talk about this idea, and you hit the nail right on the head. We live in a society now where we are more angry with the person on the receiving end than the person that's actually done the crime or initiated whatever action it may be. So you go to court. This whole critical incident happens. You're at home. It's 2 years, which is a long time, by the way. A lot of times people don't realize.
Almost 4 years.
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah, 4 years. That's right. Because it was just a few months ago, right? The whole. So 4 years. So you still haven't gotten closure because it's 4 years. You're waiting. You have the whole investigation, and now you're in a trial, and you're sitting there, and now you're watching the defense and the prosecution go back and forth. I think California passed a bill in 2020 that allows people with expressed biases to even still to be selected as a juror.
Yep.
It sounds like that played some part in your case. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it was a huge contributing factor to the acquittal. Assembly Bill 3070 basically states that the protected class of law enforcement no longer exists. So during preemptory challenges to have jury selection, the defense and prosecution ask questions. Do you have bias towards law enforcement? Before this bill, if I ask you, do you not like cops, you would be excused where there is a potential for a witness or a victim to be law enforcement.
So if I said, yes, I have a bias towards cops, then now that's going to basically, hey, you're not going to be a juror.
Exactly. Because if you express bias towards anybody else, whether it's an ethnicity, a race, a religion, you're not allowed to sit on that jury because it's not a fair trial.
Correct.
Sixth Amendment right. Well, they decided to get rid of that. So now you can have jurors who, if they don't pay attention, so if they fall asleep during trial, you can't interrupt them. If they give unintelligent or confused answers, you're not allowed to ask them to leave. So the whole idea behind jury selection is kind of muddled now. And it is a violation of people's Sixth Amendment right to a fair trial. And after we pulled the jury after the acquittal, 5 jurors said that they had an expressed bias towards law enforcement. One of the individuals she was an alternate and she became a juror. She said, do not pick me. I do not like cops. I've had bad interactions. Don't pick me.
Oh my goodness.
They picked her anyway. And so now what AB 3070 has done is you're letting these very dangerous people back into the community, and you're getting a lot of hung juries, which is a waste of people's time. It's a waste of taxpayer money. The jury found him guilty on negligent discharge of a firearm, which is a misdemeanor. They found him not guilty of the assault with a deadly weapon, not guilty of the attempt murder. They hung on 3 other charges. Because California, through all of their reform over the last few years, have decided to reduce sentences, even if we would have gone to another trial for the resisting arrest, the battery, and the removal of my firearm, he wouldn't have spent any time in jail. So the judge said, let's not waste people's time. We're just going to let him go.
Oh my goodness.
So he was set free, no probation, nobody to check in on him, just out. So the day after the acquittal, he was set free.
So did he have a criminal history before this? Do you know of or no?
I know that he had prior contacts. I don't think he had any other arrests. I heard that he had some prior domestics and similar situations with family members down in Riverside County, and then he had transplanted up to Victorville. But I think this was his first actual arrest.
So I want to separate two things real quick. So one, family came out and said, hey, he suffers from mental illness, schizophrenia, and stuff like that. Having now been on the side of it for you, being gone through PTSD and mental health and stuff like that, do you look at him any differently if it was like a legitimate case of being like a mental health crisis that he was going through? Or do you look at him as he still deserves to be punished? And then the other part of this is that I want to get to, and we'll get there in a second, but now that he's free, who's to say that he doesn't go and do this to somebody else? And who's to say that he doesn't take the life of somebody else? And in California, we've been seeing a lot of that, where people are being set free and they actually go and kill somebody else. And now everybody's left to ask, why weren't they locked up in the first place? So I want to separate those two things because they're two different thoughts. And it's challenging a little bit because I'm asking you to basically empathize or sympathize with somebody who tried to take your life. But I'm only asking that because there are going to be people who say, well, he was going through a mental health crisis and he couldn't comprehend reality from what was real or not. Does that play in you at all?
So let's be candid. During my initial encounter with him, he gave the explicit information that he was going to headbutt the fuck out of me, and if we fought, he would kill me. Mm-hmm. I had no indication of a mental health crisis. That is not to say he doesn't have one.
Correct.
As somebody who deals with mental illness, there's no outward appearance of mental illness.
Gotcha.
It's internal, and you can't see it, which is something that is hard for people to wrap their head around.
Gotcha.
If that's the case and he was diagnosed schizophrenic, bipolar, whatever it may be, I don't believe that is an allowance to commit crime.
Correct.
I think that he should seek the help, whether it's rehabilitation or therapy or whatever that may be, that the doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, I can't speak to that. Now, knowing what I know, he pled not guilty by reasons of insanity. And what that means is after we went through the criminal trial, we were supposed to go to a second phase of trial where if he was found guilty of these crimes, he would either A, go to somewhere like Patton, which is a state rehabilitation center for mental health, or he would go to prison. That was going to be up to the jury. So now that he was acquitted,
he doesn't have to do none of that now.
Well, we had a hearing where the defense said he is no longer pleading not guilty by reasons of insanity. He is mentally competent, so we believe that he should be allowed back in the community. And I only bring that up because as somebody who suffers... That's a huge deal. It's a huge deal because not only are you playing the mental health system, you're wasting the resources for people that really do need it, and you used it for your benefit. And now that you aren't potentially going to go to prison, now you swore to the court that you don't have mental health issues. So as somebody that sat on the stand and I was chastised I had a panic attack on the stand as I'm reading through my report, and the jury took that as I'm not credible, I exaggerated, the sheriff's department staged it. So for my mental health, it was perceived as I wanted attention. For his mental health, it was he was misunderstood, that's why he committed these crimes. And then he got to say the next day, I'm fine. I'm not fine. I don't wake up on a Tuesday morning and say, oh, guess what, guys? I don't have PTSD. And so for somebody that is actually living with mental health, it's very disturbing. That's why I asked you that tough question, because people don't understand that side of it. And they need to hear that side of it. Yeah. People automatically assume, a person in schizophrenia, we have to treat them as such. And what they don't realize is that the system, if it works how it's supposed to, let's say he was found guilty, but let's say he pled insanity. He can go to a place and get treatment for that. Get help. Yeah.
And if he goes through that treatment, then his sentencing can be reduced. And, but he has to go through the stages in order to overcome that, because it's saying it shouldn't excuse your actions out there that day.
Right.
Your what you did that day is not excusable, but if it is a mental health, there's a place for that. But he played the system, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden he can go out there and say, oh, I was fine that day, and escape, clean slate.
And that's exactly what happened. And the only reason I bring that up is because of your second question. During his interview to Homicide, he waived his rights. He wanted to speak, and he gave more detail about trying to kill me than I gave. He said he wanted to kill me. He tried to kill me. No person tells him what to do. He took my gun. He tried to end the violence by killing me. And the judge knew this. The judge knew that he had said, I would kill a cop and I would kill someone. I would do this again. And the judge let him go knowing this. The judge did not allow that interview to be heard in court because of an anesthesia rule where
he was
apparently
under anesthesia or some time before that.
And by law, there is no standard. It's your best judgment. Obviously, if you're in the recovery room, probably not the best time, but a day or two later, you're coherent enough to give statements. And the judge decided that on her own ruling, not by speaking to an expert or anesthesiologist, she decided to not allow that in. So the jury didn't hear very, very, very incriminating and damning statements made by him where he said, I would do this again. So now this person is God knows where. And let's be real, it's only a matter of time until this happens again. Do I think that he rehabilitated in county jail? No. Do I think he got the proper resources to help him? No. And part of this justice system is not just for me, but for him. You do wrong. If I woke up that morning and I had a bad day and I pulled a traffic stop and I shot and killed someone because I,
had a bad day.
My neck would be on the line. So why are we not holding other people accountable?
100%. We had the Riverside County deputy that was shot and killed on a traffic stop. The person that shot and killed him, two-striker, should have been locked up. The judge let him go because, for whatever reason, she let him out on bail. Mm-hmm. 2 El Monte police officers get ambushed a couple years ago. I interviewed his wife a while back, or one of the officers' wives a while back. That guy that killed those officers should have been locked up. And so we're living in this polarized time now where the justice system is not doing what it was designed to. And I'm saying this as a unique person because I have friends that have committed murders. I have friends that have been locked up for received life sentences for burglaries. But those guys, the difference between those guys and the people we're talking about is they went through the process. They changed their lives. They demonstrated that they were a different person than the person that they were when it happened. And now they want to go out there and try to change the system to get other people that same help. And I say there has to be balance. Mm-hmm. If a person can demonstrate, they have to, one, be able to face the consequences for their time. We live in a society now, it seems like, where no consequences. Do whatever you want to do and you'll get away with it. So there needs to be some consequences, no doubt about it. But we also need to have structures in place that if this guy is claiming that he's mentally ill, get him the help he needs. But if he's not, there needs to be punishment for using the system for what it is. Aren't
we doing a disservice to him by letting him free if he does have mental health?
Correct.
I mean, mental health services are not easy to come by. Mm-hmm. They really aren't. They're expensive. It's hard to find qualified people for it. So if we have the ability to actually get him help, shouldn't we do that?
Absolutely.
He's a member of our community. We owe it to ourselves to protect ourselves.
Are we going to wait for him to go and take somebody else's life?
Before
we say, hey, look, we should have did something. So the last question I want to ask you is this, so this podcast, we're aiming to bring critical incidents to light. Mm-hmm. I feel like being in law enforcement for over 10 years now, I feel like our voices get suppressed.
They do.
I was involved in a shooting and I remember for a year I couldn't talk about it, which is actually short. Mm-hmm. A lot of times investigations last 2, 3, yours was 4 years. Yeah. You can't talk about it. And so I want to talk about I want this podcast to be where you see the other side of it. Switch with our Switch series. We get to switch the roles and put civilians in the shoes of law enforcement, kind of get them to try to see what it's like to be an officer. But what better way than to actually hear the voice of the people going in it? So that being said, what is a message that you're hoping that viewers get from this podcast? And you got to realize our audience is wide. It's vast. We have a lot of law enforcement people that listen to this, but we also have an audience of people that may not like law enforcement or may have had some bad interactions with law enforcement. So what are you hoping your message will convey to them, and what is it that you would like to see come from this?
Well, it's long-winded, so stick with me.
I love it. I love it. Let's do it. I'm here for the long-windedness.
This is how I feel. When we hear those unfortunate circumstances of a wrestling coach sexually abusing a child at school, does that mean that we go and chastise every single teacher and every single wrestling coach and we tell our kids no more sports, no more school, nothing? Do we go and we assault and try and kill teachers, or these nurses that are injecting air into little babies and murdering them? Do we say every nurse is bad? Do I think there are bad apples in law enforcement? Of course. There's human beings. Do I think that every single person that wears a badge and patches is a bad person? No. And part of my coming out and being so raw and transparent is because I'm a mom. I would have died that day. I would have had my name etched in Sacramento. People would care on September 4th. And then what?
Forget about it after that.
My daughter has no mom. She has nobody to help her get ready for her wedding. Yeah. She has nobody to be with her in the hospital room when she has her baby. We are not viewing cops as human beings anymore. It's, and like your name is breaking barriers. We have to break that barrier between human beings and life and death. And I think somehow we have lost that. We have lost the human connection between people. People don't even talk to each other anymore. They're so wrapped up in this perception and this false reality that it's not connecting anymore. And my purpose of what I'm doing now, although it's hard to talk about my moment where I tried to commit suicide and my shooting, it's needed. Because if I don't talk about it, then the next person who feels like I did will kill themselves. Or the next person who doesn't want to go to jail for expired registration and they pull out and start shooting at the officer, they will kill them. So we just need to come back to a place of people and realize I didn't implement these policies. I didn't implement these laws. I am upholding them because if I don't, who will? Yeah. When you call 911, who do you think is responding? It's either me, AMR, or the fire department. Yeah. I'm not responding to your good days. I'm responding.
Well, fire has to stage first.
Right. We have to clear them in
yeah,
first.
Exactly.
That's right. But I'm responding to the worst day of your life, potentially. Yeah. So if you put these cops in positions where we just saw an entire department in Minneapolis completely dissolve. Yeah. They say, you know what? It's not worth it. I'll go do something else. So the next time that person gets hit by a DUI driver and their baby is stuck, who helps them? Yeah. If
somebody's going to call 911 in that city.
Yeah. The next time you unfortunately get robbed walking into the grocery store, what are you going to dial? 911. You're not going to call your mom. Yeah. You're not going to call your uncle. You're not going to call your dog. You're going to call the help. So let's start getting back to a place where we can receive the help. And if something happens, there's means and there's methods and there's way to go about that. But having this mental health crisis and having cops kill themselves because there's no way out, that's not the answer.
Yeah. Meagan, you have been a phenomenal guest today.
Thank you.
And I really want you to, I'm being serious, like you're walking in your purpose. Like God is using you. He spared your life that day, not only for the sake of your babies, but there's other people. He's using me. Right. I didn't know what my purpose was. I actually was one of those guys that despised law enforcement in many ways. And having walked in the shoes of a police officer, having experienced it, having gone through my critical incidents, there's a lot of people that need to have a voice. Yeah. And so you're being a voice. So I want you to know that thank you for what you're doing. Stay strong. I'm going to make this podcast or this show a little bit more lighter real quick. I'm going to ask you some other questions that are not so heavy. Yeah. And then we're going to wrap this thing up. So fast as you can, as soon as I ask you, give me your answer. All right. If you can have a superpower for any day, or if you can have a superpower for a day, what would it be and why?
I'd want to be invisible. So I could be a fly on the wall and just, spy on people.
You want to be nosy. You want to be like Karen. You want to be like, okay, I see what you're doing over there. What's your go-to comfort food after a long day?
Spicy chips.
Spicy chips?
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It ruins me, but I love hot Cheetos.
Really?
Yeah, it's
so weird. You have the red fingers after and stuff
I don't know why.
Favorite cereal?
Fruity Pebbles.
Fruity Pebbles. Okay, I like that. Fruity Pebbles. I'm with you on that one. Favorite dessert?
Chocolate chip cookies, like the warm right out of the oven.
Soft or hard?
No, soft. Gotta be like the gooey, barely cooked.
Got to. Yes, exactly. Gotta taste like, are these even cooked? Right. Exactly. Favorite movie?
Oh gosh.
That's a hard one. Anytime somebody asks me that, it's always so difficult.
I don't know. I don't even think I have a favorite one. I do, right now my son has been pressuring me to watch Super Mario Brothers, so I think that's it right now.
My kids love that. They have that little song in it. It's like, what is it?
Peaches?
Yeah, Peaches, yeah. Peaches. Yeah. I've heard that for
I
like
hear it at
2
2
weeks.
a.m.
Yes. So in my house too. If you can travel anywhere in the world right now, where would it be and why?
Europe. I've always wanted to see that. I think it's a beautiful culture and beautiful people, and I would love to see that.
Awesome. 2 more questions. What hobbies or activities do you love to do to unwind or relax?
I love spending time with my family and my kids. I like just, playing on the floor with them, their little puzzles. I like going and working out. I like hiking. I love outdoors. My husband and I take our Jeep out when we can, just kind of disconnecting.
That's awesome. Last question. If you can have a conversation with any historical figure, who would it be and what would you ask them? It's kind of hard.
Oof. I think I'd have to say Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I kind of admire his stance where he wasn't a politician and then he became one because he knew he needed to be. And then we found him probably one of the best presidents that we've had. He's very real and authentic, and I think he had a way of uniting people.
Yeah.
And I would just like to know how he did it.
Well, I think we could all use some type of political wisdom right now
Right.
in light of election season, because I don't know what we're doing.
I don't know.
But Meagan, in order to thank you, I want to give you first a hat.
Thank
you.
you.
A little hat right there.
I love it.
A copy of my book.
Is it signed?
I will sign it right
Okay,
now.
thank you.
And then we also have a nice shirt for you. You tell me what size.
Smells
one for you.
perfect.
Perfect. I'll give you one for your husband as
Thank
well.
you.
But Meagan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been awesome. You're a real trooper, and I know what you've gone through has been super, super hard. But continue to do what you're doing. Continue to fight that good fight. God spared your life for a reason. There's no doubt about that. Is there anywhere that you want people to follow you or no?
I only have Instagram, so it's
Okay.
just my name. If you want to follow along this journey as we try and go and bang some drums in Sacramento and get some things changed, and I appreciate the support.
Thanks so much, Meagan, for coming on our show. And thank you guys for watching this show. This is a show where we're going to be highlighting so many different critical incidents that police officers, current and former officers, have been involved in. A lot of times their voices are not heard. So what way for us to hear what they've gone through than for me to interview them and for us to find out. So again, if you guys like this, do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and comment below. Tell me what your guys' thoughts are, and tell me if you know somebody that has a story that needs to be heard. Thanks again, and God bless.